Good day, everybody. This is Sean Hill from the Guyana Shorebase. I'm here to talk to you about some opportunities for suppliers to work with Guyana Shorebase. And to start off with, I would like to thank ExxonMobil and the Centre of Local Business Development here in Guyana for giving us this opportunity to participate in this event. So the Guyana Shorebase is one of the premier shore bases that exists in Guyana for the service of the offshore oil and gas industry. All in combined, we have about 500 years of experience in the oil and gas industry amongst all of our staff. We have a consortium of worldwide partners that help contribute to the success of the shore base, as well as a large range of suppliers there inside Guyana to help us continue with our success. We're very proud of what we have achieved so far since we started up the company in 2016. So far, we have managed to have great involvement and great inclusion with the Guyanese community. We are a Guyanese company by all sense of the word. We have a 60% local partnership. Our spend out there is approximately 80% at the moment inside Guyana. And of our 350 employees, we have about a 94% local content amongst all of our employees that we have there at the company. We have a range of services and facilities that we utilize to deliver services to the oil and gas industry offshore for ExxonMobil. And some of those I'm going to go over with you on the next slide. So starting off with some of the personnel services that we provide, these are all a range of services that personnel and other companies here in Guyana can get involved with GYSBI to help us promote and continue the success of GYSBI within the Guyanese oil and gas industry. So on the personnel side, some of that is around training and transportation. We also help out a bunch of our tenants with housing, PPE supply, work visas, meet and greet from airports, pickup and transport. We have a significant portion of our business is around construction and engineering. We have some of our construction done in-house, but that does require a lot of services from the local construction company as far as engineering, architecture, fabrication, and construction management throughout many facets of the Guyana Shorebase, ranging from buildings up to pile driving, building berths, and warehousing. Some of the other services that we offer, when those facilities are operational, we have some inventory management. We have a large range of supply of fuel and water out to the rigs. Some of these services, of course, they also require a lot of certification and calibration services, chemical supply and spare supply, with which we involve local suppliers here in Guyana. Being a port, we also have a lot to do with logistics. So we require a lot of services on freight forwarding, customs brokerage, vessel management, ships agency, and husbandry services. Some of those we work in-house. Some of those we work with outside suppliers to provide those services to the Guyana Shorebase. There is also a range of permitting and licensing that is very important for us to continue to operate legally within Guyana. Guyana Shorebase does have a dedicated team to help that, but we do outreach to a lot of other individuals within Guyana to assist with all that licensing and permitting, specifically when it comes to Environmental Protection Agency and Central Housing and Planning. In Guyana, we don't just say that we have a lot of services and that we have a lot of products, which we would like companies in Guyana to participate in. We actually do utilize all of those services here in Guyana. So from the start of 2017, when we started off with 8 acres and only 50 employees, today we have grown to over 80 acres and 350 employees. And by this time next year, we're going to continue to double that to almost 140 acres and employ about another 150 people. So the growth that we're seeing here in the Guyana Shorebase is tremendous. And that opens up the opportunity for a lot more people and a lot more companies in Guyana to continue to work with the Guyana Shorebase and continue on with its growth. So how does the Guyana Shorebase work with its supply chain, purchasing and logistics to maintain our high national content percentage? We have an in-house procurement and logistics team. We strongly encourage a very competitive tendering environment, which we continue to do to make sure that we are getting cost-effective services in a very transparent manner, which is fair to all suppliers. We have an experienced team in the Guyana Shorebase who evaluate all the tenders as they are provided back to the Guyana Shorebase, and ensure that we maintain a fair level of transparency and response to all of our suitable suppliers. By doing so, we have managed to maintain quite a high percentage of spend in Guyana and a high number of employees here, and high number of suppliers here in Guyana. We utilize a Centre of Local Business Development for all of our tenders and all of our expressions of interest. Everything that comes out from the Guyana Shorebase will be posted on the Centre for Local Business Development. And once we get those responses in, we will evaluate them based on fair and equitable international standards. We will go through and we will review your safety performance, your historical performance, your experience, your proposal, scope of work compliance, and as well as the cost. All local suppliers who we believe are capable of providing that services to the Guyana Shorebase, depending on the value and the scope of that work, we will meet with those suppliers to make sure that they fully understand the expectations on safety, quality, performance, timing, cost, and payment, so that when the work and if the work is awarded to that individual company, they are very aware of what the expectations are from the Guyana Shorebase onto that local supplier. So what upcoming opportunities do we have here at the Guyana Shorebase coming up for the rest of 2021? Some of the major opportunities here are on this slide. This is not all of the this is not all of the opportunities that we will have coming up in 2021, but this is the main ones. So we're going to have some large tenders coming out for customs and brokerage, insurance. There's always going to be a lot of structural design and installation tenders. You'll see that listed throughout our scope of work for 2021 multiple times, because we have multiple projects ongoing at the same time. We generally attempt to diversify and award these similar services, such as a structural design and installation that you see here, to different providers to make sure that we do not overload one provider with too much work, to make sure they have enough bandwidth to be able to provide all those services to the Shorebase throughout the year. There are some basic goods suppliers. Heavy lift truck and trailers is something that we are going to be looking at in this year, as well as services. You can see the list of those here on this slide. A lot of these services that you see will be related to a lot of our berth expansion opportunities that we have coming up. So what we have here, shown here on this slide, is just one of the major infrastructure projects, and a lot of the opportunities that you saw on the previous slide are related to this new berth expansion of berth 3 and berth 4 that Guyana Shorebase will be completing in 2021. Going into some of the operations that we see on the port, beyond the major opportunities that I just mentioned, there are always going to be some smaller opportunities. So what you can see here is all of the various different services that the Guyana Shorebase has on its port side. So we are always going to be looking for services to help us supply chemicals. We have a lot of chemicals coming, lubricants, as well as some spill containment. So there will always be tendering opportunities for those coming up. Drilling operations and warehouse, so PPE supply, small materials supply, other opportunities that are always presenting themselves. Trucks, trailers, lubricants, spares for vehicles, forklifts and cranes, tires, is something that we are frequently purchasing as well. There are also opportunities with our water storage and our diesel storage plant. Those are new facilities that are coming online in 2021. So personnel supply, personnel training, chemical supply, spares training, calibration and certification of such facilities are something else that we'll be looking at this coming year. Moving on into the industrial estate, some of the other smaller opportunities that we will have coming on throughout the year in relation to this development would be the maintenance of our sluice gates and our submersible pumps to make sure that we are removing the water from the industrial estate as it's coming up. The supply of small items and spares and consumables for some of our chemical warehouses, the supply of chemicals for our wash bay and our hydrosite system, the supply of gravel, fencing, sand to complete the other 50 acres of development that we will be doing in 2021. So as you can see, there are a lot of larger opportunities that we need to work with to complete our major infrastructure developments in this coming year, as well as many smaller opportunities that we just need to continue to develop for day-to-day operations within the Guyana Shorebase. So how can you, as a local supplier in Guyana, become a vendor to help contribute to the Guyana Shorebase and the oil and gas industry? We've tried to make this very simple. If you get onto our website at www.GYSBI.com, there is a link there at the very top that says vendor registration. If you click on that link, it will open up everything that you need. On the top of that new page, there is a form up there on how to become a supplier for the Shorebase. You can download that form, fill it out and submit it. There's instructions on there on how to submit that form. And if you have any other questions or concerns about what you are applying to and what you are signing up to, further down on that same page, you'll see the terms and conditions for being a supplier at GYSBI. That will give you a lot more details as to some of the basic standard quality and payment expectations that exist when you would become a supplier for the Guyana Shorebase. If you have any further questions on that, all of our contact details are on www.gysbi.com, or you can find them here on this final slide. Thank you for your time.
Gaskin Peters, the Director of the Center for Local Business Development, and I will be moderating today's session. But before we ask Sean to introduce himself, I just want to go through some housekeeping matters. Please note that this session is being recorded. There is a question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, so please type your questions into that box and I will ask those questions of Sean. So Sean, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing at GYSBI?
Sure, certainly, Natasha, I can do. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to both Exxon and the Centre of Local Business Development for giving us this opportunity to have this live Q&A session, and for everyone else who's attending and asking the questions to see how they can participate both with GYSBI and the oil and gas industry booming in Guyana at the moment. So starting off with myself, so I am the General Manager of the Guyana Shorebase. I've been in Guyana for almost 2 years now. I've spent almost 20 years in the oil and gas industry in various countries, and again had the privilege of moving here 2 years ago. So here at GYSBI, we are the premier shore base for the offshore services. We work with a lot of the oil and gas companies to coordinate getting their products and their services to the shore base, and coordinate with Exxon getting all of those services offshore to the rigs and the vessels and the FPSOs. So that is our part in the entire supply chain of the oil and gas industry.
Thank you, Sean. Now, things with GYSBI is that there is a Guyanese leadership within the entity. I think our companies were certainly happy to hear of this, that we have a prime contract similar to Navy. So can you tell us a little bit more how it is that enter into the value chain in Guyanese ownership in the entity?
Yeah, certainly. So you're asking about the local content and ownership of GYSBI?
Yes,
Yeah, because is a 60% owned entity. So we are a majority owned Guyanese company.
as well as just being a majority-owned company. We are 94% of our workforce are Guyanese. 80% of our vendors come from Guyana, and our spend in Guyana ranges from 60% to 80% quarter on quarter. So, you know, by all intents and purposes, the majority of everything we do is Guyanese, and all of the capital that we raise and all of the money that we make each year is reinvested into the company. The Guyana Shorebase does pride itself on being a Guyanese company by all intents and purposes. And the only reason that we go and we outsource products from outside Guyana is when we cannot acquire those products inside Guyana.
Excellent. That's Sean, can you tell our viewers a little bit more about your procurement process? I know you went into this in the video, and how it is that local companies can be part of that supply chain. You know, we may have companies here that are not part of that supply chain. So how can they enter, you know, into your supply chain?
Yes, certainly. So the easiest way for you to become a part of the Guyana Shorebase's supply chain is to go to www.GYSBI.com. That's GYSBI.com. And from there, there is a link on that says vendor registration, and you'll see it right at the top of the page. You go to the top of the page there, you'll see a form that you can fill out that will help, it'll explain to you how to submit the form. It'll allow you to put all your company details on there to make sure you have the right registration, the right tax registrations, etc., as well as explain the scope of services that you want to provide to the Guyana Shorebase. If you want to get into some more detail, there's also a second link on that same page that goes through all the terms and conditions that are standard with that the Guyana Shorebase has with all of its suppliers. Now, once you go ahead and you submit that form, here within our procurement department, it'll be, depending on the services that you say you want to offer the Guyana Shorebase, you'll go into a list, and then whenever we have a new tender or a new opportunity come up with those services there, you will be included in our communications to provide services to the Guyana Shorebase for that category. Sometimes we also, when there are larger projects or larger opportunities in play, we always communicate and publicize that on the Centre of Local Business Development processes through their Facebook pages and portals. So you will frequently find large projects that we undertake publicised on the portal. For those, we do work with the CLBD, and we require you to follow those processes that may be on the CLBD for a larger tender opportunity.
Thank you, Sean. So can you tell us a little bit more about the feedback process? Because we would have companies who are applying for expression of interest, and maybe they were unsuccessful. How do you sort of apply that feedback process so that they can then better themselves the next time around?
Yeah, certainly, Natasha. So with the larger EOYs that we publicise on the Centre for Local Business Development, those are the more significant infrastructure projects that we undertake. As a part of our process, once we get all of the submissions from the individual companies, we have a fairly rigorous evaluation process that will require us to look at what they have technically. It requires us to look at your safety programs you have in place, your history, your experience, as well as anything else that we may ask for, your application, your quality, your scope of work, your understanding of the project that we are asking for. If we pass all of those criteria, then we will move on to evaluating the commercial part of the criteria. But before we go ahead and we make any award, at that point in time, we will sit down with the, there could be any 2 up to 10 vendors to make sure that we fully understand the scope of work. Now, depending on what that scope of work is, we have had large walkthroughs of certain facilities. One example was we were going to build a bridge out here in the Houston area. We had about 6 or 7 vendors, and we did a walkthrough of that facility to make sure that everyone understood the technical scope of work, where it was going to be built, and give people the opportunity on the actual work site itself to ask questions and fully understand the scope of work. Those vendors that then pass on to the next and final stage, when we get down to our very final pool of potential suppliers, we will have a more formal one-on-one meeting, generally in our conference room here in the Houston area, to make sure that you really do understand that scope of work, to make sure that you understand commercially how you'll be paid, when you will be paid, to make sure you understand any demerits that may happen for poor performance, so that we as GYSBI understand that the supplier also understands the scope of work and the commercials, and that there is no ambiguity after awarding the contract as to what the expectations are on our suppliers.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for explaining that process. As Sean indicated, there are small tenders for which, they'll go through the list of suppliers for very small projects. But then for the larger projects, those will be tendered out. So Sean, can you tell us a little bit more about the onboarding process? We have quite a few Guyanese companies who are entering into the industry. How has GYSBI been supporting those companies, when they would have won a contract? Is there any support after the fact in terms of the onboarding of a contract?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've been doing a lot of work with onboarding local suppliers ever since we started operations in 2016. The Guyana Shorebase didn't have the infrastructure in place when we first started up operations. We do spend a tremendous amount of time and effort with a lot of our local suppliers when they are successful, coming on board, making sure that they understand the standards and expectations of the oil and gas industry. That is around quality, and a lot of it is around safety as well. We try very hard to make sure that we do not just stick with those same suppliers the whole time. We do try occasionally, depending on what the project is, to branch out to other suppliers to continue assisting them with the onboarding process. So for example, I've already used the example of the bridge that we are building out in the Houston area. In that example, we have our own engineering department and project management department. We have our own safety department as well within GYSBI. So those departments work with our suppliers who are out there building the bridge to make sure that they are meeting the quality requirements of the design and the safety requirements that are expected in the oil and gas industry. And that same support is offered to any of our suppliers doing any of our projects, throughout GYSBI.
Thank you, Sean. I welcome new suppliers. And of course, at least have HSS programs, so mentorship programs, short seminars, as well as business courses to also help those contractors to continue to win work within the industry. I want to touch a little bit on the payment terms. I know one of the things here in Guyana that contractors were a bit used to was the upfront mobilization payment. And of course, this is not something that is practiced within the industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about your payment terms and your interaction with local entities as it relates to that specific area?
Yeah, sure. Typically, you're right. We do see a lot of requests for initial mobilization, a lump of funds up front. It's generally not something that we encourage. Unless the mobilization of the tools or the equipment that is being requested is from outside of the country. Now, while we do understand that there is a certain amount of money that is required to be spent to mobilize, let's say for a large project, for example, if the cost behind that lump sum of money cannot be justified, it is not something that we are going to accept. Having a black box of money with no validation behind it, it's not something that we can work with. So typically where there is a minor mobilization fee that is justifiable, we have no issue with it, and we have approved that on multiple occasions. But again, sorry, yeah, it does need to be justifiable. The second question related to payment terms. Our standard payment terms are 30 days. So on completion of an approved invoice with all the appropriate supporting documentation, that invoice is received in the office, it is reviewed and it is paid, and funds will be paid into the supplier's account within 30 days of receipt of that complete invoice with the appropriate supporting documentation.
Thank you, Sean. So yet again, we're hearing 30 days for local contractors. We would have heard that most of these primes internationally, it's a 45 days. And so for the Guyanese, for the local entities, they have reduced these terms to 30 days. So again, another plus to encourage local content here in Guyana. So Sean, you spoke about invoicing and your procurement process. Can you tell us how the local companies are doing as it relates to this particular aspect? Have you been having any challenges with them invoicing on time and so forth before we go into some of the specific questions that are coming in?
Yes, that is a good question. There have been, obviously, invoicing in an appropriate, timely manner is very important. The cash flow that we are dealing with as GYSBI from both our customers and our suppliers, as well as many of our suppliers themselves, is very important. We expect to see the invoices from a completed service or delivery within 30 days of that service being completed. We do have many instances where invoices are delivered 6, 8, or 12 months after that service has been delivered. And of course, that can cause problems because we may be in a separate financial year there. And the cash flow of our company, and I'm sure the supplier's company, isn't really flexible to absorb that sort of difference. So making sure that you are invoicing in a very timely and appropriate manner will help our suppliers get paid in a more timely and efficient manner as well. We expect to pay all of our suppliers for the service that has been delivered, but we also expect our suppliers to have a system in place to make sure that they know to invoice us when they have had a service. The supporting documentation on that invoice, it is also important as well. So if you are coming to GYSBI and you have some personnel on site and you have been here for 3 days, it's very important to get that timesheet signed off by the appropriate person so that you can show, yes, I was there, I completed my task as per GYSBI's purchase order. I was there for 3 days, the appropriate person has signed it. You'll send the invoice into GYSBI and everything will go along very smoothly. If the appropriate supporting documentation isn't behind that invoice to validate that the work has been done, or the invoice is 4 or 5 months later after the service has been provided, that's just going to cause problems within GYSBI. It's going to take us more time to verify and validate that work was done. And then of course that is going to then result in us taking longer to pay the supplier. So, to that point, Natasha, I think our suppliers can help us help themselves by making sure that they are invoicing correctly and timely.
Thank you, Sean. So we heard it there from Sean, ensure that you invoice on time and it's done correctly, because you've done the job, you need to be paid for that job so that you don't have to go to another contractor and then you're requesting upfront mobilization payment. So ensure that you're paid on time. Now, Sean, we have a specific question coming from a local entity. They would like to know about the security tender that GYSBI had out and what is the status of that tender.
Yes, GYSBI did have a security tender out maybe in Q2 last year. I think that was the last time that we did tender that service. The result of that tender is that we remained with our incumbent security provider. It is a good example of a tender, I think, where we have seen a very significant variance in the responses to that tender, both in price and quality. I know that we did have some follow-up meetings with many vendors who gave us a submission, who understood the requirements of that tender. But it is an example of a tender that did have quite a large variation in responses. So I would just implore all of our providers to make sure that you do understand the requirements of the tender, both technically and commercially, and that will help you get into the top tier of potential providers on the shortlist.
Thank you, Sean. We heard a very similar story from SIPEM yesterday. So again, to our local Guyanese vendors, please ensure that your pricing is competitive. Remember, these companies will judge you on your prices, on your quality, on your HSSC. So we need to ensure that everything is intact. Of course, they need to remain competitive because they are continuing to bid for work from the operator. And so as local vendors, we also need to be competitive when we're bidding for contracts from these entities. So Sean, we have the case where, we may have local companies that are saying, I don't have an international certification, so I cannot get into oil and gas. It becomes a barrier. So tell us a little bit more about, is certification required for all of your projects? What are some of the projects that you do require that certification? So our local vendors can know that this is not really a barrier to them applying for services.
Yes, so to a lot of our local suppliers, if you're not sure if there is some sort of international certification or expectation or other, I would encourage you to reach out to us at GYSBI and ask that question. So again, on our website, you can find links. I think it's info@gysbi.com. You could ask those questions, or procurement@gysbi.com to see if there are any barriers to you providing a service to GYSBI. If you're trying to make the decision whether you want to spend that money to try and acquire that international certification, or if it's not required. I would encourage you to reach out. We have no problem answering those questions to make sure that you, especially to those companies who want to do the right thing to provide the services to the industry. For a lot of our services here at GYSBI, we have a very wide range of services, and we certainly do not require international certification for all of them. I attended the Stena Q&A the other day, and that is a good example of where there must be more stringent international requirements on an offshore rig. So I can understand why they have very specific needs on everything from a valve to seals, all the way down to paint. Here at the Guyana Shorebase, we do not need those sort of specific international standards. We are able to accept a wider range of services without those international standards. We purchase everything from tires and cars up to offshore baskets. So the tires and cars, for example, do not need any sort of certification, yet an offshore basket will, and ongoing maintenance and certification as well. So depending on the service you're asking, depending on the service that you are supplying, please feel free to reach out and ask if you need anything to provide that service to the Guyana Shorebase.
Thank you, Sean. A reminder to the participants to keep the questions coming in the question and answer box so that we can present those to Sean. He's here to answer all of your questions. So this is your session. So please continue to type those questions in the Q&A box. So thank you for clarifying that, Sean, the differences between the onshore versus the offshore services and where the international certifications would be required. Also, a reminder that the center has its HSSC and ISO mentorship program free of charge to the local Guyanese entities. So we're also there to support you guys if it is that you do require these type of certification. So Sean, you noted earlier that your company has between, 60 to 80% in terms of local content and being able to give work to the local entities, which is quite remarkable, within this industry. So can you tell us where you are still seeing some gaps in terms of local companies applying to these areas? So where are some of the strengths and where we still have gaps and room for the local entities to grow?
So that, I guess that percentage range that I mentioned, that is the number of dollars that we spend each quarter, ranges from 60 to 80%. It varies because there are some low frequency items that we procure that are not available in Guyana, such as a crane, for example. There are only a certain number of manufacturers that manufacture these sort of cranes to these sort of specifications, and we will go directly to the manufacturer to purchase those items. It really doesn't matter where in the world they are, and then that's fairly standard. So there are some services and items that will probably never be available in Guyana, as they would not be available in many other countries. And because they are such a low frequency service, it's probably not something that anyone's ever going to want to bring to Guyana to maybe sell one crane every 2 or 3 years, depending on the type of crane that you're looking for, as an example. However, the other services, the more frequent services, such as the maintenance for that crane, the tracks for the crane, the calibration, the fuel, the fan belts, the fuel filters, all of that work we do inside Guyana. So while the initial capital purchase may be outside Guyana, all of the maintenance, certification, and calibration is done inside Guyana. And that is a frequently, in the example of the crane, that is a frequently recurring expense. My recommendation to any of the local suppliers who are thinking about this example would be to focus on those high frequency, sales, which we would be using, such as a certification on the crane, which happens every 3 to 6 months, or the maintenance on the crane, which we do every single month. That is where I think you are better off spending your time and energy, because it will be a constant cash flow for a local business entity.
Thank you, Sean. And can you repeat for us where the vendors can be registered onto your portal? Because we still have a few companies that are asking about, where to get registered.
Certainly. So you can register on www.GYSBI.com. I can type that into the Q&A section of the chat here. That is our company website, and on that website you will see a link that says vendor registration. So when you go onto that link that says vendor registration, you'll see a form down there. It's fairly self-explanatory. You'll get to fill that out with your company details, what your company provides, and then you can email that form in.
Thank you, Sean. So as Sean indicated, get registered onto GYSBI's vendor list for the larger tenders, the ones that they will tender out. Then ensure you're registered with the Center for Local Business Development, so you can go to centerguyana.com, supplier registration portal, and get registered. So Sean, we have someone here who was asking about, we may have a company that is new. However, there's a lot of human capital there. It was formed by persons with experience. How does GYSBI respond to new entities, such as those young entrepreneurs?
Being one of the first companies that was formed and operating in Guyana since the birth of the oil and gas industry, We are very open and always have been very open to young entrepreneurial Guyanese companies trying to establish themselves in this industry. We have been working here in Guyana since 2016. Since that time, we have spent a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort in working with new Guyanese companies trying to get into the industry, as well as, say, some more established construction companies who are trying to get into the oil industry. So we are very open and very used to working with young entrepreneurial Guyanese companies, especially those who have some sort of experience that they are bringing to the industry.
Thank you, Sean. That's certainly welcoming news for young entrepreneurs out there. Now we have a company that's saying, you know, I've invested, I'm ISO 9001, I'm AS 9001. What are some of the opportunities for me within GYSBI?
So I think, as you mentioned, Natasha, depending on the service that these companies are providing, please do make sure that you register and you keep in contact with the Centre of Local Business Development. The larger opportunities that we have coming out, those will always be registered and advertised on the Centre for Local Business Development. For the smaller opportunities that we have, a lot of the rope, soap and dope, make sure that you register on GYSBI.com, and then from that point in time, whenever a smaller tender comes out or just some basic simple supply, that is where we will feed off our own internal registration of suppliers to make sure that we are approaching the potential local suppliers that have shown interest in working with GYSBI. We are also always open if you do have something else new that you want to offer, if you are expanding your business, if you have something new, some new service or delivery, or if you have acquired some certification, or if you would just like to see what you can do to form a greater bond or with the procurement department of GYSBI, I would encourage you to reach out to procurement@gysbi.com and see what you can do. Maybe you'd like to come up here and give a presentation to the procurement department to explain the depth and breadth of the products and services that you are there to offer. Unless you decide to come out here and display and show yourselves as to what you can offer, most people are not going to know. So I will always encourage a supplier at any point in time who would like to come up to GYSBI. I can make my conference room available to you and a projector if you'd like to come up and showcase your company, your team, your technical expertise to the procurement department.
Thank you, Sean. Certainly welcoming news for these vendors. So once again, a reminder to get registered. Ensure you register with the center as well as on GYSBI's portal. And one of the things, Sean just indicated, you have to ensure that your profiles are completed. So when you register with the center, it's just not only a name and an address. What are you doing? What are your services? Upload all of your documentation, your certification, because these prime contractors are looking at your profile to see what it is exactly that you're offering. So ensure that those profiles are completed. Now we have another specific question here, Sean, that deals with a tender for lightning that GYSBI would have placed last year, and they would like to know whether that has been awarded.
The short answer there is no, that has not yet been awarded. There were some technical concerns and delays with that opportunity, and so we have just temporarily put that on hold for now.
Thank you, Sean. Now we have local entities that, they've recognized that there are certain technical services that they're not able to provide, and they're entering into partnership opportunities with international companies. What is your advice for those companies as it relates to working with GYSBI?
To start off with, I would make sure, spend the appropriate amount of time and energy understanding what it is that the industry needs. The oil and gas industry is very unique and specific. And what the industry here is doing in Guyana is right at the technical limit and capability of this industry, which is almost 200 years old. So the technicality and breadth of services that is needed is very specific. So if you do believe that you have a service that you are lacking, that you can provide, and you're looking at partnering with an international company to provide that service, before you do, I would strongly encourage you to do your homework to make sure that that is something that is going to be required by this industry. A lot of what we do offshore here, it is extremely complicated and extremely technical. And a lot of this does require, I'd say, pre-qualification through proven experience. So you would also want to make sure that you go and vet your international, I guess, technical partner to make sure that they have provided said service specifically to Exxon or wherever else you're trying to deal with, to make sure that they are qualified to be able to assist you in winning that work. Don't just jump into it because it is the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is a very large industry with a very wide range of well types and offshore development types, onshore, offshore, and they are not the same. There are a lot of very qualified and very experienced foreigners that I have met throughout Guyana, and I'm sure a lot of them would be very happy to help you, to meet you out of your office and give you a little bit of advice to see what can be done to assist you in developing your business.
Thank you, Sean. Certainly good advice there. You know, as we always advise the companies here at the center, and Sean indicated, ensure that you do your due diligence. Ensure that you visit these companies, see their operations. So it's not only the case that they're coming to visit you, but you go and visit them, see what's happening before you sign off on anything. As Sean indicated, this is a large industry, so you have to ensure that before you put your signature on that paper that you have done your own due diligence. Now we have a specific question here, Sean, as it relates to fleet management solutions and whether it is that GYSBI has any need for those type of services.
I guess when we're talking about fleet management services, we're really talking about the management of trucks, GPS tracking of trucks, etc. Unfortunately, no, we do not. GYSBI does own its own fleet of trucks, cranes, forklifts, and we only operate those within our own designated area. We will very rarely go outside to other ports and other areas unless it is absolutely essential. Sorry, no, that is bad.
Thank you, Sean. Now, we also have some companies that are interested to know, what is GYSBI's expansion plan. I'm not certain how much of that we can disclose, but they're asking about that industrial land there and, what is your plan for the future in terms of an expansion?
Certainly. 2020 has been quite a turbulent year, but also quite a very successful year with a lot of expansion and infrastructure development projects that we kicked off at GYSBI. So some of those projects included a water treatment plant and a fuel farm and additional berth 3 and berth 4. Those will all be completed in 2021. So some of the new opportunities will be related to those infrastructure projects that we have initiated. The water treatment plant I mentioned, so we'll be looking to find a local supplier, vendor, who can provide us with the appropriate technical expertise, spares and chemicals needed to treat water to World Health Organization standards. On our fuel farm, we'll be looking for a local supplier to help us with the ongoing maintenance and spares certification and calibration of that fuel farm. For the berth construction, we'll be looking for some local suppliers to continue providing us with bulk fill, technical evaluation and monitoring for settlement and subsidence, and surveying of that berth. We will also be doing some additional roadworks out in the Houston area. We will be doing some infill and very basic revetments out in our southern area. We will be also looking at doing some more, earthworks and our Houston industrial estate. So some of those are some of the major developments that will be coming from GYSBI as we move forward into 2021. I know in my presentation I had some other ones listed in there. If you go back and have a look at the pre-recording the Centre of Local Business Development had on Monday, you'll find some more on there. I just can't think of them off the top of my head right now.
Thanks, Sean. So a reminder that those videos can be viewed at GuyanaSupplierForum.com. Now, Sean, could you remind us of the procurement email for follow-ups? Because we have a company here that is saying that they would have responded to an EOI and they would like to know, where that process is. It's specific to an electrical contracting opportunity. So how can they get information in terms of where that tender lies?
Anyone who wants to get in, anyone who wants to get in contact with GYSBI can either do it at info@gysbi.com or procurement@gysbi.com. Both of those emails are listed on our website. I would like to mention that if it is specifically related to an EOI that you have submitted or a tender that you have submitted, and that evaluation process is still in process, do not expect to get a response from us. We will be contacting you. We want to make sure that our process is fair and equitable, and it will be based on the submission that has been submitted. And when GYSBI is at the stage when we need to get back for further clarifications or negotiations, we will do so when we are at that stage of the process.
Thank you for that clarification, Sean. Now we have a question here on marine and industrial paints and whether that is a requirement in the future, that whether GYSBI is going to be requiring those services and if there is any particular brand of paints that you're going to be requiring.
Marine paints, generally no. We do have some basic marine paints, of course, because we are a port and we do have a berth facility. So there is some limited requirement for marine paints here at the Guyana Shorebase, but the majority of your customer base would be someone like OEG or Schwest or Stena or Noble, who have facilities offshore in the marine environment all the time.
Thank you, Sean. And a reminder to our participants to keep those questions coming in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. For those of you interested in making contact with GYSBI, please contact the center and we will provide you with contact information for all of the prime contractors. Now, Sean, we have a question here on human resources and payroll management services. Will GYSBI be requiring any of these services in the future?
This is one of the services that GYSBI does internally on its own. One of the departments that we have within the organisation is human resources and payroll. It is because of the size of the organisation, it is generally not something that we outsource.
Thank you. And we have here a company that's asking about vessel handling and whether you can provide us with an estimate for port calls that have been done by GYSBI so they can gauge what is coming in the future in terms of the marine industry.
GYSBI has worked itself up to an efficiency level and has done sufficient dredging so that we are able to handle up to 6 to 8 vessels within a 24-hour period, which we have done successfully many times in the past. As the majority of our vessels are related to specific customers for the oil and gas industry, I'm a little bit hesitant to give exact numbers beyond our GYSBI's capability.
Thank you, Sean. Now, is GYSBI interested in any executive coaching, leadership training? Would that be something that you're going to be procuring in the future?
Yeah, very good question. Yes, we are. That is something that I would like to get into more in the start of during 2021. If I remember correctly, I think training and mentorship was one of the key services that we wanted to be tendering in 2021 because it's something that I want to pick up on. Sorry, we have had very rapid growth over the last few years. We're up at 350 employees now, and I would like to make sure that those employees who have moved up into supervisory positions are given more leadership training so that they can effectively mentor and manage the teams that they have had under them, where they previously have never had the opportunity to be in a leadership role. So most certainly, and I just elaborated on that question a little bit because there probably are some other people on this on this call who have organisations who are growing at a rapid pace, and I would also encourage you not to forget those soft skills trainings because it will make a massive difference into the growth and development and bench strength of your organisations as well. It's a very good question. Thank you.
This is certainly an area that we will begin to see developing in the future. A lot of the prime contractors that we've been speaking to this week have said that as you just indicated, local personnel are moving into management level, and there is need for training and these soft skills in the future. So, Sean, we have a specific question here on machinery. You did know that GYSBI has quite a few machines that you utilize on the premises. And so this person is interested to know where they can get sort of that list so that, they supply parts such as belts and fuel filters and so forth. So is that something that GYSBI would give out, that type of information?
If I will not be giving out specific information on the equipment that we have here. However, if you do have specifics and if you are able to provide parts, fuels, fan belts, etc., my recommendation would be to make sure you register yourself appropriately. Just say that you offer these services. As we mentioned, jump on our website, download the form, make sure that you say, we can offer mechanical calibration, certification, spares and preventative maintenance to forks, trains, cranes, trucks, trailers, and especially if you have the ability to get spares for various types, we'll be happy to work with you on that when we come out with a specific requirement. Because we have many types of cranes and trucks and forklifts. It's quite a variety.
Thank you, Sean. And for those specific details, as Sean indicated, info@GYSBI.com or visit GYSBI's website at www.gysbi.com. So Sean, you noted earlier that your company is looking to expand, and so we have someone here who's asking about rental space, whether GYSBI would consider renting any of its space within your compound.
Yes, we do have space available to rent. We, being a shore base that is specifically focused on the oil and gas industry, we do try to make sure that we represent the industry appropriately, and we rent our space to those companies that are also specifically focused on the oil and gas industry. We don't really have any intention of being an all-encompassing industrial estate where just anyone comes to. It is, we're trying to make sure that we focus and service this industry.
Thank you, Sean. We have a question here on welding equipment and whether there's going to be a need for those type of services, welding consumables, anything in the area of catering at GYSBI.
Welding equipment, we do a very minor amount of welding equipment. Welding here just for our own purposes for general maintenance. But the majority of the large welding, we do outsource for fabrication to other construction companies inside Guyana. On catering, no, generally we do not have a need for catering here at GYSBI. Sorry.
Okay, so we're certainly coming towards the end of the questions that are being submitted. So at this point in time, Sean, I just invite you to give us your closing remarks to really speak to the Guyanese public as it relates to local content and the work that GYSBI will continue to do in the future as it relates to this particular area, some of the upcoming opportunities that you would have mentioned on the video.
Yeah, certainly. So in closing comments, I'd like to make sure that I encourage everybody to make sure you do register on the Centre for Local Business Development. A lot of the large opportunities are going to be posted on the Centre for Local Business Development. So if you're registered there, you're going to automatically be notified about those opportunities when they come up. Now, as Natasha mentioned, do make sure that you have all the appropriate documentation, certification, and everything that you need there on the Centre for Local Business Development so that you can participate. Within GYSBI, we always do have smaller needs, one-off needs that are frequently coming up, not larger opportunities. So please make sure that you get on the GYSBI website and make sure that you are registered with GYSBI so that you can participate in those smaller opportunities as they are coming up. Sometimes it might not be the biggest opportunity that you're looking for to get your foot in the door to be a supplier. Sometimes those opportunities can start with the smallest thing. So if it is an opportunity just to come in and supply a little bit of PPE, for example, and move into something more significant, which is what your intention is, please make sure that you do that by registering with us. And then that will help give you some relationships within GYSBI to give you a better chance of winning the larger work. There are quite a few opportunities coming up, a lot on the construction, but also a lot on the supply side, spares, chemicals. We have a lot of rolling stock out here. So maintenance, preventative maintenance, calibration, certification of all of that equipment is always going to be a big spend for us, I would say. Training and mentorship as well of our Guyanese workforce of around about 350 people is also a big focus of what we do. So, if you do provide any of the services within that sphere, again, please make sure that you're registered both with GYSBI and the Centre for Local Business Development. And finally, I think one of the other good pertinent questions that we had out there was making sure that you understand the industry that you are trying to participate in, especially if you are looking at partnering with somebody. Make sure that they are the appropriate people to partner with. If you need help with that, please feel free to reach out. I'm sure Natasha can provide you with some advice from the CLBD. I will be happy to provide the same. And I'm sure there will be a lot of other very experienced people within the industry who are here permanently in Guyana who would also be prepared to offer that same service. We enjoy and we are always trying to strengthen all of our local Guyanese partners who work with us and our suppliers who work with us. We put a lot of time and energy into that. We have done that since 2016, and there is no intention to stop that because we have so much more to do here in Guyana that we really want to make sure that we continue to focus and grow those strengths with those suppliers and the competencies of all of those suppliers here in Guyana.
Thank you, Sean. Reminder to look at Sean's video at the GuyanaSupplierForum.com. As Sean indicated, the company is here for the long term. They're here to support Guyanese vendors, and that is done throughout the procurement process. So as you have questions, please feel free to reach out to them. Don't feel as though no help is available. They are there to assist you. They want to see you grow. But of course, ensure that we remain competitive. At the center, we have a suite of services that we offer, as I noted before, our mentorship program in health and safety, our ISO program, as well as our courses and seminars free of charge to the Guyanese public. So at this particular point in time, I just want to say a special thank you to Sean and the team at GYSBI for participating in this year's Supplier Forum. And we look forward to continued engagement with GYSBI and getting that information out there to, especially to our local Guyanese contractors. So stay safe, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasant day.